Thanks, guys. James Westling, John Betts. I'm the operations manager for Salina Radio and the play-by-play radio announcer for the El Saline Cardinals and the Bethany College Swedes during the football season. John Betts of Kansas Pregame, tell us a little bit about yourself, about Kansas Pregame and the radio show that you and I get to do on a weekly basis.
I'm the publisher of Kansas Pregame Football Magazine, the state's only comprehensive preseason high school and college football magazine. I also collaborate on kpreps.com, a high school football website covering the entire state. And James and I host a Kansas Pregame radio show every week that runs on 14 different stations in Kansas. If you want to know more about it, head to kpreps.com and click on the radio button.
We're taking a look at the 4A, the 3A, and both 8-man brackets here today. John, in 4A, after week one, round one, what was the most surprising first-round outcome in your opinion?
Well, I think that the Heston win over Concordia was a little bit of an upset. Heston, one of those programs that just always has athletes year in, year out. And new coach Mark Marinelli is doing great things with Heston down there, but Concordia had a lot of athletes and may have made some mistakes that kind of hurt them in that contest, including some interceptions and a key turnover. I was surprised to see Heston come out with a victory. I wasn't surprised that it was close, but I thought Concordia would find a way to win. Well,
speaking of Heston, winning that game 21-14, they will host a playoff game in round two, and they'll host Ulysses, who hammered Pratt 32-7, an impressive performance by the Tigers. They're now 8-2.
Well, you know, I don't know a great deal about Ulysses this year, but what I do know about Ulysses is that they are contenders year in and year out. They have high expectations for their program down there, and they always expect to be in the playoffs and then make some noise once they get there.
There's a lot more games in the 3A bracket that our viewing audience will have more interest in, so we'll get to that here momentarily. But before we wrap up the 4A bracket, Buhler and Abilene, we were both very impressed by the way the Cowboys played. They're 10-0, Buhler's 10-0. Can Abilene hang with Buhler round two?
Well, when you look at Abilene, it's a team that played very close with their first-round playoff opponent early in the season. It was a league rivalry game that they won 27-21, I believe, and they came back Tuesday night and just dominated Clay Center. Buhler, outstanding running back Tanner Fisher, a junior, takes off right where Jordan Oden left off last year. And I think that Abilene is going to give them fits. Early in the season, I would have said that Buhler would run away with it, but I think Abilene will make a game of it.
In the Class 3A bracket, round one, Hutch Trinity and Whitewater Remington, a pair of teams with great coaches and great quarterbacks, had already met in the regular season. Trinity hammered them. Not the case the other night. 26-24, Hutch Trinity by 2 over Whitewater Remington, who led for a good majority of that game. Your thoughts?
Probably one of those situations where having a repeat matchup, you get an opportunity to learn some of the weaknesses of your opponent. And it looks like Whitewater Remington's defense may have learned how to take advantage of some weaknesses that Hutch Trinity had. But ultimately, great teams win games regardless of whether they're close or blowouts, and Hutch Trinity found a way.
They did absolutely that. 26-24 the final. Was that a wake-up call for Trinity Catholic, you think?
Well, you know, it could be, but, you know, when we get into this point in the season, everybody's good.
Right.
Everybody's good, and you have good coaching staffs if you make it to this point. So I don't want to take anything away from Whitewater Remington and what they did. You know, it's going to be a hard, tough road for Hutch Trinity all the way through, and they learned that in the first round.
There are a ton of great matchups in the Class 3A bracket. Let's rattle off a couple of those. Hutch Trinity, their next round opponent is Wichita Collegiate. Beloit will play Norton in round 2. Smith Center, they get Scott City up from 2A to 3A. And Garden Plain and Conway Springs, another repeat matchup between those two talented football teams. As I mentioned, there's a boatload of great matchups here in round 2. Is this the most competitive classification in the state of Kansas?
Absolutely, no doubt. From 1 to about 7, the top 7 teams, I really think that they're just a touchdown or maybe 2 touchdowns apart. You know, mentioning those matchups, Wichita Collegiate, last year's state champion in 3A, has kind of been written off.
Yes.
People have kind of forgotten about them. And, of course, they sustained an injury to Marcus Fox, their quarterback, very talented athlete, and it'll be a difficult road for them. Norton, another team that may not be getting a great deal of respect, but it is very good. And it's not just Terrell Lane, which he brings plenty to the table, but they've got a great offensive line. They've got Cade McKenna, the great middle linebacker, and I expect them to make a lot of noise. Smith Center is going to have their hands full with a very good Scott City team, quarterbacked by Ron Baker. Got a couple of standout juniors in Colburn Couchman and Luke Hayes. And I think that Smith Center will certainly have a tough contest. That could be a situation where a home field advantage could be very helpful since Scott City has to travel. And then Garden Plain, Conway Springs, it seems like we just played this game a couple weeks ago. Conway Springs found a way to win 29-14 over a rival in Garden Plain. And honestly, I think that Conway Springs right now is the best team in all of 3A. And Garden Plain will have their hands full, but it might be one of those rematch situations where they've learned some weaknesses of their opponent. And I certainly think it'll be a great matchup.
You mentioned Wichita Collegiate, the defending Class 3A state champions from a year ago. A lot of people have written them off, much like Centralia in Class 2A. They'll play with a chip on their shoulder. Norton, they feel like they're not getting the respect they deserve. Smith Center, always a factor. Scott City, they've been so close but no cigar in the last 5-6 years. There's a lot of good football teams that are hungry here in this bracket.
And I think that every coach tries to play that respect card at some point in the season. I wouldn't be surprised if even Smith Center during their 79-game winning streak at some point said, hey, we're not getting the respect that we deserve. That's just what coaches do.
Of all those matchups, and this might be a little bit unfair, but is there one game that really sticks out to you as being the game to keep an eye on?
Well, I think that Garden Plain Conway Springs game is absolutely the game. I think that Hutch Trinity and Wichita Collegiate will be a great matchup, but the Garden Plain Conway Springs game, these are just two of the best teams in this classification for years.
Let me ask you this, of the teams we've spoken about here in the last couple of minutes, how many of them have legitimate state championship possibilities?
Conway Springs, Garden Plain, Norton, and Scott City are absolutely legitimate contenders. I still need to see a little bit more out of Hutch Trinity.
So just about all of them.
Yeah.
Smith Center, they beat Sterling round 1, but only scored 28 points. I see some people saw that score and thought, what's going on with Smith Center?
I think that's just probably their style of football. They like to eat up the yards and put together long drives. And they've had a ton of injuries. I mean, you know, when you lose as many players as they've lost over the course of the season, it's going to be difficult to score at will, you know, like you've done for basically the last 7 years.
And the thing about all these games we've spoken about, they're all on the same side of the bracket. Silver Lake's up top, but these guys are going to have to beat one another to get to that state championship game in Class 3A.
Yeah, the western half is definitely the strongest.
Can Scott City survive that side of the bracket? I know that people in Southwest Kansas are very excited about the season they've had, and rightfully so. They're a phenomenal football team. They feel like this could be their year. A lot of good teams to battle.
You know, I don't know. I actually was a little bit surprised in some of the recent struggles that they've had with teams, but I don't know if I was giving Goodland enough credit or not. You just can't tell. They're just very efficient at what they do, so that may not always translate into 60 points.
In the Class 3A bracket, just before we wrap up here and get to 8-man, West turn half of the bracket against the eastern half of the bracket. Silver Lake, they've got to be the clear-cut favorite on the eastern half. Will they be awaiting one of these opponents on the western side that we've spoken about? More than likely, wouldn't you think?
Well, I think that the western half is the strongest, and Silver Lake, with some of the injuries that they've sustained over the course of the year, if they make it that far, I'm not sure that they'll be able to hang with the western half representative.
Okay. He's John Betts. I'm James Wesley, and let's take a look at the 8-man brackets, both 8-man Division I and 8-man Division II. In 8-man Division I, a lot of blowouts really in both 8-man 1 and 8-man 2. Round 1, which has been kind of a recurring theme the last several years, but Lincoln and Hill City, a lot of people in Lincoln were geeked up for that game, and Hill City had no problems blanking the Leopards 50-0. What did you think of that matchup?
Well, I had an opportunity to watch the game, and it was the first time that I got to see Reggie Jordan play live, and wow. I mean, the kid is absolutely an amazing football player, and a lot of people see the rushing numbers and they think it's just his legs, but he throws an incredible ball. He's got a great arm, and he had 3 completions of over 30 yards. And but it's not just Reggie Jordan. Adam Pfeiffer is a great running back who catches the ball out of the backfield. And Tyler Best, the 6'4", 220-pounder, he comes to hit. And they have a number of guys, smaller guys on the offensive and defensive lines that just like to hit and play really physical. They've got an outstanding team.
Taking a look at this bracket, there are some matchups in round 2 that I think people will have some interest in. And let's take a look at who Hill City's next opponent is. It's Jetmore-Hodgman County. Two great athletes will battle in this game.
Yeah, Evan Krieger earlier in the season tallied 10 total touchdowns in a game, which tied a national record. And Jetmore-Hodgman County, the combined Hanston-Jetmore school districts, two schools that are known for their football, and when you put them together, you obviously have an outstanding team.
Madison got an impressive win round one. They are 10-0, coached by Fred McLean. They beat Clifton Clyde 82-32. They hung 82 points in the playoffs. Was that a bit of a statement game for them?
82 points against a Clifton Clyde team that for the last 5 to 7 years has just been absolutely outstanding. So I certainly think it was a statement game. Madison, very consistently successful, but haven't been able to win the big game and get over the hump yet. This might be their year.
You know, I made the statement earlier that there were a lot of blowouts, and there were, but there was one very competitive game in the 8-man Division I ranks in round one. Lebo and Lakeside. Lakeside's had a very impressive season. This one went to the wire with Lebo pulling out an 8-point victory, 50-42.
One of the most successful seasons that Lakeside, previously Downs has had in years, and has a lot to do with Coach Kurt Christians, who brought a winning mentality to that program. And they have a number of athletes there that are very, very good. Lebo probably a little bit more battle-tested with their schedule possibly, and just found a way to edge them out.
Lebo was tested in that game by Lakeside Downs. Could that benefit them down the road here in the next couple rounds?
Absolutely, but the key for Lebo is that two of their best players who've been injured for several games are back in it.
Pretty Prairie rolled through the regular season. Is this their state championship to lose in 8-man Division I as we wrap here on this side of the bracket?
Hill City's outstanding, Osborne's outstanding, Madison is outstanding, but I don't think Pretty Prairie can be challenged. Daniel Crable, Hunter Pittman, a number of returning starters. They're very, very good.
He's John Betts. I'm James Westling. We've been through the 4A, the 3A, 8-man Division I brackets, looking at these playoff matchups. In 8-man Division II, looking at everybody's records, everybody left is really, really good. There are a ton of great football teams. There's a lot of 10-0s, some 9-1s. I think the worst record of the bunch is 8-2.
The top three teams, though, Baileyville, Hanover, and Otis Bison, I think are probably the elite teams. Cheyenne has put together an outstanding season, one of the best in their history, and they've got a number of talented athletes. But Otis Bison has just crushed people this year. And Baileyville and Hanover, year in and year out, they are the cream of the crop, and they're probably going to end up meeting up for an epic playoff game in 8-man football. Cheyenne
disposed of Victoria 56-6 in round one. Otis Bison beat Fowler 46-0. These two teams will play at Bird City, 4 o'clock. Otis Bison and Cheyenne. Can Cheyenne hang with Otis Bison? You obviously speak very highly of them.
Well, Cheyenne's had a great season, but it's going to be very hard to maintain that against Otis Bison. The win over Victoria was impressive because Victoria has just been an absolute terror since joining 8-man football. However, they lost Cameron Dinkle to injury, and he was their best player, and it was really difficult for them to replace him, and Cheyenne was able to expose that weakness and get a big victory. But I think that Otis Bison, they could be on a crash course with a state championship. I think a lot of people are writing them off and already declaring the winner of the Hanover-Baileyville game the state champion. But Otis Bison, I think, can make some noise.
Looking at the 8-man Division II bracket and the potential matchups here in the next couple of rounds, Baileyville, B&B, and Hanover are on a collision course. That's the game, potential matchup, I think, that me personally I'm looking forward to most. Is it the same for you?
Baileyville and Hanover will probably be the best playoff game. Assuming that they all make it there, it will probably be the best playoff game of all classes, because earlier in the season, this was a 31-28 victory for Baileyville on a late field goal. And these guys have been going back and forth in the TVL, the Twin Valley League, the best 8-man football league in the state of Kansas, and I think that contest will be epic.
We've taken a look at the 4A, the 3A, and both 8-man Division I and Division II brackets. He's John Betts of Kansas Pregame. I'm James Westling. Thanks for watching, and keep in mind Smoky Hills Public Television is your home for 8-man state championships. Let's go back to Casey.